Welcome back. Let's talk Manchester City now. And this story from Simon Mullock in the Sunday Mirror. Axe Mancini or we're off. Three of the influential City players, David Silva, Joe Hart and the captain, Vincent Kompany, telling the club that if they don't sack Roberto Mancini, they would leave in the summer. Andy, what do you make of that? What do you make of player power? What do you make of the dismissal of Roberto Mancini?
I tell you, it's been an astonishing week. The aftermath of Mancini's sacking. We've got that piece by Simon Mullock in my paper, the Sunday Mirror. Ian Latham in your paper, the Daily Mail, did a very big article about exposing the level that we all knew that they probably didn't particularly like Mancini. We never knew the depth of the feeling against him.
What comes across, they just didn't respect him.
They just didn't respect him. And I get, when you see, senior players there, axe him or else, ultimatum, it always reminds me a little bit of, a club that suddenly has a huge amount of money comes into it and pay players very highly. And then we used to see that all the time at Chelsea. And I always thought Man City were the club that doesn't want to go down the Chelsea route, even though they've had a similar cash injection. So from that point, it's a little bit worrying. I sometimes think it doesn't really reflect that well on the players either, that they're sort of, openly now clearly briefing people as to like what Mancini was up to. And thirdly, what I would say about the players is that's fine, and listen, it comes across as though Mancini's style of management, not just with the players but throughout the club, his micromanagement wasn't the best. But what I would say is that, they are still very highly paid professionals, and I don't mind them saying or coming out and saying he didn't like him or whatever, but I think when it's on the pitch, I think that's when is a worry. And when I went to the cup final last week, that performance was a performance of them saying we don't like Mancini. And it shouldn't have been like that at Wembley for all the supporters of Man City who went there to support the club, all the supporters around the country and around the world. And I think the players let themselves down at Wembley simply because they were, and if the stories to be believed, they were all, the one consolation for them was that they were saying was that Mancini was going out. So I don't think anyone's come out of this particularly well.
No, I think you're slightly unfair on Joe Hart, actually, because Mancini has hammered Joe Hart all season. Well, hang on, you go back to the Real Madrid game, I keep referring back to this, which has been 2-1 up, lost 3-2. Joe Hart, an honest opinion, just we shouldn't have been losing that game, we should have shut up shop and hang on. Mancini comes in a press conference, he should stick to goalkeeping, I'll decide. That was just an honest remark about what they should have done.
It was also the interview, it was the flash interview immediately after the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought that was really unfair to hammer him. He clearly had an agenda against Joe Hart. He blamed him for the Man United goal, the one, Van Persie's, which flicked off the edge of the wall, again, from a deflection, then goes into the dressing room and says, Joe Hart, it's your fault. Now, I can understand why Hart's thinking, hang on a sec, why are you always hammering me? Do you remember the England press conference when we talked and we said, I will listen to the people I want to listen to, or I respect, and the England press officer's gone, he doesn't mean Roberto Mancini by that, Well, clearly he did. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with Joe Hart being a bit annoyed about that and actually thinking, you know what, this bloke's got it in for me.
Yeah, but Sean, maybe he should man up a little bit. I mean, when you say hammered, I mean, saying like, well, Joe Hart should, stick to goal.
But there was no need. It was a fight. It was a fight. He didn't need to pick.
Is he really that sensitive?
It was a fight. He didn't need to pick. He could have just said, Joe's right. We shouldn't be losing from that position. Full stop. That would have been the sensible thing.
Or Mancini could be right in saying, well, he thinks that Joe Hart maybe should concentrate more on what. That's his opinion, no, Sean.
It was just, as you say, flash interview. We shouldn't be losing from that position.
But seriously, is that hammering someone?
Are you saying there was something wrong with Joe Hart saying that? I just think so. He comes in and picks a fight early on in the season.
Mancini's response is no reason.
Deliberately picking fights. I'm not.
Danny, how many managers do that? Come out and criticise their players, particularly a player who's been so instrumental in them winning the title before. Particularly also a player. Particularly, I mean, Mancini maybe should have looked at himself and some of his decisions in Europe, and actually he maybe should have looked at Joe Hart's performance against Borussia Dortmund when he kept Manchester City in it. What I find fascinating about this is that the players who you consider, and still consider, the heartbeat of that club, the English players in that dressing room, like Joe Hart, like Lester Scott, even though he's not always in the team, and like James Milner. I mean, for James Milner to get upset, he's one of the sort of nicest, most loyal, hard-working, steadfast club servants. For him, obviously, to be sort of slightly upset by what's going on.
He's coming back round to you.
Seriously, Donny,
my heart is bleeding for these guys, I have to say.
Well, the bit I did find quite amusing was apparently when they sort of criticised some of his sort of style and the fact that he was slightly sort of self-indulgent and used sort of tanning sessions. So when you've got multi-millionaire footballers sort of, lecturing people people on sort of, lifestyle decisions. That's sort of slightly amusing. But I did think, I agree with you, looking at the cup final performance, when you see someone like Zabaleta, who's been there, footballer, player of the year, who gives everything for that club, who's a hard-working, a real sort of trooper, just the type you want in your team. When you see him getting sent off, you then think that is a club that's got serious problems in the dressing room, which needs eradicating. And we all know that, we knew before the game that Mancini was on his way, and it was confirmed fairly soon afterwards.
Yeah. Sure, what did you make of the advert yesterday in the Manchester Evening News that Roberto Mancini took out, thanking Manchester City supporters for the last 3 years, the 3 trophies? He counts the Community Shield they won at the beginning of the season.
Mourinho always counts the Community Shield. I thought it was brilliant by Mancini. I thought it was a fantastic thing to do, very clever idea.
From the heart?
Yeah, I think it is from the heart, because we saw the City fans before the FA Cup final, massive cheers for Mancini, songs for him. He waved to them as he came off the pitch. And to be fair, at the end, they weren't giving him any stick. I think it was directed at the players. City fans loved him. Most City fans didn't want him to go. I don't think they'll have, to come back to Dunny's side, I don't think they'll have a lot of sympathy for the players, actually. I've got to be honest on that. But I understand why some of the players vented their views. But look, the fans and Mancini, I think they'll be inextricably linked forever, really. They did like him.
The Manchester Evening News thing was interesting. It was brilliant by Mancini, and the sort of when the sort of story broke yesterday morning that this was in the paper, the Manchester City fans were brilliant. I mean, I was getting sort of tweets saying, "Have you got an email for the advertising department of Gazzetta dello Sport, because we want to put an ad in Gazzetta in Italy saying grazie."
There was one from Man United fans saying Fergie's going to put one in his local paper, the London Evening Standard.
do you think Chelsea fans will do one in the Evening Standard for Rafa?
But
just on Mancini, you have to respect what Mancini has done there. I mean, those 3 trophies, OK, remove the Community Shield, FA Cup, title. If you're a Manchester City fan who's been going to sort of Macclesfield and sort of, to distant corners of the country, watching poor football over the previous 20 years, Mancini took you out of the wasteland.
Yeah, they did. What about the actual dismissal itself, Annie? Just a quick word on this. Can the dismissal ever be clean? If so, was this one of the cleanest, or is that just impossible given the profile of the...
Well, Donny thinks it's wrong.
Well, I didn't say it was wrong. No, that's we were
not
going back over that ground.
You think it's right?
No, I can understand why they got rid of him. And I think when the hierarchy, the new hierarchy, Soriano and Begiristain came in, I thought it was inevitable from that moment, to be perfectly honest with you. You're not going to bring 2 guys like that in who aren't going to want their own man. Their own man clearly is going to be Pellegrini. No, it wasn't handled particularly well. The story came out before the cup final, was then revved up on the morning of the cup final, and basically it wasn't neither denied or then they either backed him or sacked him at that point. Then you had the sort of farcical situation, post-cup final, where he says, it's stupid, and blaming the press officer. So no, it wasn't handled well at all. I think it's been a huge setback for Manchester City. We all know what they're trying to do, or they're trying to get a good values and ethos to the club going forward.
And I keep hearing this. I heard it when Mark Hughes was there. Oh, yes, we're building a 10-year dynasty and all of that. No, they're not. They're like every other club. If it goes a bit wonky, you bring in a new manager, you go and spend 60 million on a new striker, just like everybody else does. They haven't got an academy of kids that are going to come through.
That is very naive. You go down to the ground, and instead of going to the stadium, have a look at what's going on the Etihad campus. Have a look at the photographs from the air, the pictures they're putting in there.
I've seen lovely campuses at Chelsea and Arsenal and everywhere. They're everywhere. Tottenham, fantastic. Ultimately, if results aren't going well, change the manager, buy a new striker, buy a new midfield. It's what they all do.
But don't you think it's a good idea to have a fabulous new training ground and a talented academy that's bringing people through?
Well, the talented academy, I'll be very interested to see how many 14, 15, 16-year-olds come through from Manchester City into the first team. We heard all that about Chelsea. Chelsea were building this, dynasty of players who would come through.
You then have an issue with the manager, whether he's going to pick them. I agree with that, but the fact is you cannot blame Manchester City for not investing heavily, which they have done.
It's not.
Sorry, you're saying academies are cloud cuckoo.
I actually think
on that basis, then we scrap the national team.
I actually think with big clubs in this country, I actually don't think that the manager in position is too fussy about whether that 14-year-old...
So sorry. Well, you were the PFA the other night when they actually celebrated the achievements of that Manchester United generation.
That's a slightly different example.
So you're saying close down all academies?
Chelsea... No, Did I say close down all
whenever
academies?
I talk to him about Newcastle, I say we've got so many good players who come through, Cramlington Juniors, but they all go down to Southampton. What we need is Newcastle United have a proper academy.
Close down academies. I'm saying use them properly. I'm saying use them properly. If you're going to have that academy, then say, right, let's make sure we give those a chance. Chelsea, Josh McEachran, where's he gone? Went off to Middlesbrough. Do you think he'll ever get into the first team now? Lost his way, because there's no encouragement for those players to go. However, at Manchester City, they're apparently going to keep 3 or 4 places open just for anybody who comes.
So you were closed down Southampton's academy, which was produced Bale, Shaw, Walcott, Oxlade-Chamberlain.
Don't you just have an argument for the sake of having an argument? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you want the manager who comes in place, to be on board with it and to bring through them. But they're not. Mancini wasn't interested in that, was he?
They're not, clearly then, if that's the case, why we think they've sacked him is because, as they said, they want a more holistic approach.
What is that? What is it?
Well, it just makes the trying to become holistic.
Go on, you probably advised them on the statement, so what is it?
It is, there's a touch of FFP sort of lurking around in the background. They do want to bring kids through, that's why they're investing in the academy.
They all want to bring kids through. They all say that. Every club goes, yes, we'll bring the kids through. And everyone goes, oh, round of applause, round of applause. By and large, they don't.
Can I get a word in?
Yeah.
A sensible one.
Patrick, well, I don't know if it's sensible, but Patrick Vieira, is that a sensible decision? He's now taking over the development squad at Manchester City. Clearly, this is a movement in a certain direction for Patrick Vieira.
And also, I think it is in the Sunday Mirror and maybe a couple of other newspapers, and with the idea as a future manager of Manchester City. Now, clearly, Pellegrini, you look and you think, well, if they're going for this more holistic approach, then you think, well, actually...
What is it?
The whole, as in the whole of the club. Holistic, it's usually used, obviously, in terms of medicine, Sean. I mean, I don't want to give you an English lesson here as well.
It'd be a long lesson.
Seriously, nobody's defined it. Just except you. Thank you.
No, Sean, what it means, just very brief, what it means is taking an interest in developing all aspects and all levels.
But he doesn't agree, though, because Sean's a short...
We've done that. Let's move on to Vieira. I want to hear about Vieira.
If you look at Pellegrini and you think, actually, would he be the guy to sort of oversee this? Well, probably not in the long term. So that's why, if you're then fast-tracking Patrick Vieira beneath him, it makes sense. And everyone speaks so highly of Vieira, and I think he is very well regarded there at City. And I just think it's a really good move to put him in charge of the elite development squad.
And it shows they're thinking long term.
Yes, why not put him in charge now then?
Well, because they want to develop him, properly. They maybe think he's got enough
why does he not have the ability?
But also, Sean, if he becomes manager, wouldn't he benefit? If they are going to bring through their own players, elite players, wouldn't he benefit from first having been the head of the elite development squad?
My understanding of Vieira, he wanted to work in different areas of the holistic approach to football management. But a word on Pellegrini as well, Sean. I'm sure you'll be in favour of his appointment. What will he bring to Manchester City? 2 weeks ago, they were beaten. His Malaga team were beaten 6-2 by Real Madrid.
Well, also people have made the point that he couldn't win the title with Real Madrid. £200 million spent and all that, even though they got a record points haul. Look, he's clearly a talented manager. He clearly knows his way around the block. But, hey, they believe in him. The Spanish hierarchy believes in him. So, it's clearly going to be less confrontational than it was before.
They're sixth in La Liga.
They were seconds away from getting into the semi-finals of the Champions League.
Yep.
So, I mean, he's got something about him. I mean, I take the point about the sort of €200 million spent at Real Madrid, but that wasn't him. That was people above him. And, if you talk to... Well, whenever you hear individuals like Guardiola, who knows a little bit about coaching, he is always raving about Pellegrini. And I think that managers are often the antithesis of the person that they replace, and Pellegrini, to use your favourite, was a little bit more holistic. He might bring 1 or 2 players through from this non-existent academy that you keep going on about. So I think, there is a sort of an element of long-term... But I agree with your point about, Vieira at some point down the line, and that is good. If there is a long-term plan in place, that should encourage.
I think with Pellegrini also, I think it's important, that he can work. They've obviously identified him, the chief executive and the sporting director, as someone who can work with them, as a group. And I think what they thought with Mancini was that's never, ever going to happen. He will always just be basically working as an individual and not so much working against us, but, clearly the Robin Van Persie saga of him continually saying, well, we should have got Van Persie, that we didn't get him is what's costing us. I think the chief executive and the sporting director will have earmarked Pellegrini and thought, well, actually, we can work with him going together going forward.
Yeah, OK. All right, and calm. Next, we're going to be